I'm a fluent Spanish speaker, was considered a level 3 Spanish speaker, which is more than, typical. And I was put on a counter, which is, I said, okay, listen, the bureau needs, and I say I was going to go with the bureau needs, and they put me on a CT unit.
Well, did they have you looking at them trying to bring in guys through the border in Mexico or something?
No, I was
So it
working.
just was
So
asked
it was just, hey,
backwards.
we need, So they didn't, they didn't look at it. I mean, and again, I wasn't part of the decision making. They just said we need a person here, but they didn't look at it. Okay, let's put this guy on, the gang unit because we need a Spanish speaker over there. Let's put it. For me, it wasn't, what I was utilized for. So I had to cut my teeth and earn my way. And then finally, once I had earned enough time, I was able to say, I'd like to go over there. I want to work. I want to speak Spanish. I want to use this for my ability. And I was transferred over finally to the gang unit in 2012.
So, because you made this distinction a few minutes ago about cartels and then gangs from South America. But maybe this is way too much of a simplified way of me looking at it. But obviously the cartels are pumping the most and the most organized at that level, and they're like the suppliers, if you will.
Yep.
But the way I've always thought of it is a lot of these gangs, they're making their businesses where part of their business is also doing the same thing, even if it's getting supplied by those very same people.
Yes.
So why were they even separated? Like, I would think that would all be under, not to say like every investigator is working on all of them together, but I would think that would be under the same umbrella, but it sounds like it wasn't.
No, so in Newark, and I think in most divisions, in New York, FBI Newark, they all have the same construction where there's one group, which is the organized crime, OCDF, Organized Crime Enforcement Task Force. They go after cartels, they go after the large scale dealers. I mean, getting 1 kilo of coke is, small potatoes compared to what they really want to get. They want to get 5-10 kilos here. 5-10 kilos down in Texas, that's small potatoes to them. Down in Texas, I talked to FBI agents down there, like, 5 kilos is, that's lightweight compared to what we normally try and get.
Yeah, Texas
20
A&M's
to
a good
30.
time. Yeah.
Right. So, the other squad is the gang unit, and they're going after Bloods, Crips, and that's where it is the also has the MS-13, the Trinitarios. What is amazing to me is, I chased MS-13 most of my career, but what I found here in New York, New Jersey, you don't see these. You see the Trinitarios, which is a Dominican gang. You see them in Florida and New York, New Jersey. They're huge here. It's originating out of the city. Is that they are much worse to this country than MS-13 by far.
All right. On what basis?
Here's why.
Interesting.
MS-13 may, get the flashy violence and, butchering, but Trinitarios, they're smart. They stay under the radar and conduct the criminal activity, sell drugs, do the scams, do the grandma scam. They're scamming people out of thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. So they're doing more damage to our community by doing all these things than MS-13 does. MS-13 is not organized to have a structured, okay, we're going to do, organized scams and grandma scam. So for me, Trinitarios are much more dangerous. Financially.
But barbarically, what would you still say the same thing?
Barbarically, yes. MS-13 is no.
Right.
Yeah, because the Trinis don't do that. I mean, they're your traditional gang but they're transnational because they get a lot of their communications from the DR.
I don't want to de-emphasize those types of crimes and stuff because that's horrible, and obviously, it sounds like they were unfortunately really good at it. But don't communities get way more up in arms when they see like 3 decapitated heads in the neighborhood versus like 3 grandmas that got scammed?
Of course. But why? Because it's in the media. If it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
If it bleeds, it leads. I mean, how many tens of thousands of dollars are getting stolen and how many drugs are being sold to our kids, and those kids are going ODing or things like that, and that never gets any publicity. Yeah. So people get up in arms based upon what is put in front of them by the media. Yes, 3 decapitated, the quadruple homicide in Long Island. That was horrible. Absolutely. And there are other incidents of, in D.C. and in Boston of homicides. Yes, absolutely. Each one of those are equally horrible, but those get media coverage.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of the crimes that people don't even know about because a lot of these elderly people are getting scammed out of $10, $20, $40, $50,000, and they're never even reporting it.
What's like let's start with the Trinitarios. What's their organization structure? Like we think about the Italian mob, people could say, well, they got a family, they got a boss, they got an
Right.
underboss, a consigliere, some capos, whatever. You know, how do they work here in the U.S. and how much of that power structure reports directly back to country of origin as well?
Well, the country of origin is the DR.
Yep.
And I spent, maybe a year really, investigating them. So we really didn't get into the nitty gritty, dirty, get my hands dirty on them. So that would be a little bit difficult. I know that they have a lot of command and control structure and communications with the DR. They get a lot of the scams come out of the DR. They'll make the calls, and then once they have a hook here in New Jersey, they'll call New York, and then New York will task somebody in New Jersey. So there is a triangle communication.
Got it.
So the Trinis here in New York City, they're the big dogs. New Jersey is a close second.
Damn it.
And
behind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're the redheaded stepchildren of everything in Jersey.
Hey, don't do that.
I love it.
Don't do that.
I love being the redheaded stepchild.
Just because you don't live here anymore doesn't mean you can make fun of us. We're the alphas here.
There's 3 things I miss out of Jersey. The food is the pizza and bagels, and Dunkin' Donuts, D&D.
Right now, the U.S. is helping fund wars in Ukraine as well as Israel, and God knows what other places where war may or may not break out sometime soon. What these wars have required is for us to print money, which, creates more debt and leads to the devaluation of the United States dollar. Is your bank account prepared to fight back against inflation? Well, not to worry. That's why today's sponsor, Lear Capital, is here to help. Lear Capital specializes in helping people like me and you protect and grow our wealth with gold. Did you know that during Trump's last presidency, gold rose 65% to a record high? If it happens again, that puts gold at $4,200 per ounce in Trump's next term. In my old career, when I worked on Wall Street, the smart guys in the office always talked about having a portfolio allocation to gold and precious metals. They viewed it as a timeless protection against the other assets that are more risky. And living through the market fluctuations I did, I see exactly what they mean. When it comes to buying precious metals, you need the right company in your corner. That's why I trust Lear Capital. Lear has over 27 years experience, and Lear is also the only company with a 24-hour risk-free purchase guarantee. That means if you change your mind for any reason within 24 hours after your purchase, you can get a full refund. Now it's time to take action and get educated on alternative investments like gold and silver. Call Lear today at 855-271-1871 or go to trylear.com/Julian Dorey. That link is in the description below to get your free gold and silver wealth protection kit. There's no obligation either, just free information on protecting your hard-earned dollars with gold and silver. Once again, that phone number is going to be 855-271-1871, or you can go to trylear.com/Julian Dorey, which is the link in the description below. Finally, as a special offer, if you make a qualified purchase, Lear Capital will give you up to $15,000 in bonus coins. So one last time, call 855-271-1871. You don't have Dunkin' Donuts
There's
in Montana?
no Dunkin' Donuts.
That's a crime.
It's absolutely a crime. I've been trying to find out how to franchise and open some D&D up in Bozeman. But
they don't have a big Indian population there? So where's the Dunkin' Donuts then?
Wrong Indian population. Wrong Indian.
No, I'm talking about the Indian, like the actual Indian population, not the Native American population.
That's what I'm saying. No,
we call them the wrong thing.
Nothing.
That's not
There's
what they're called.
There's 2 communities up there. Huge Hispanic community.
Yeah.
Huge Hispanic community because, and this goes back to what I was talking about, Sinaloa Cartel, CJNG, and Tren de Aragua, TDA, they're blossoming up in Montana.
In Montana?
In Montana.
Have you come across them?
Construction.
Yeah?
Yes.
Do you tell them what's up?
No. Okay. I stay away from them. But I've seen them, and because I know what to look for. I know how like certain vehicles and how they drive around town. So, but here's the thing is I know how to spot them. The problem in Montana is this. There's so much construction going on that a lot of the migrants over the last 4 years, those 15, 16 million people that came across the border, a lot of them went up to Montana for the construction. And when you get a gang like Trini's, MS-13, or Tren de Aragua, TDA, they'll go where there's communities. And there's 3 communities up in Montana. You have you have Hondurans, Venezuelans, and Mexicans. Those are the 3 big Hispanic communities. And there's a huge Hispanic community up in Montana because of the construction. So comes up behind them is TDA. CJNG and Sinaloa are there because, hey, listen, there's profit to be made. And it's the northern border. So I have a feeling that there's a lot of product coming down from Canada.
Yes. I had Kat Schultz here. She was talking about that. She's been to some of their places in Canada.
Yeah. And the fact of Justin Trudeau saying, well, less than 1%, listen, that's what you think. Okay, that's what you think because that's what was caught. I think there's a lot more coming across the border. And now with such a strong front at the southern border, I think a lot of them are going to shift. Listen, crime is like a river. It's going to flow no matter what. Even if it's you put up a wall, that river's going to go in other directions. And it's going through Canada right now. And CJNG and Sinaloa are up there. And the problem is this. And I've been working with people and talking to them and saying, listen, there's 3 things that you need to properly investigate and to dismantle a criminal organization, Hispanic criminal organization. And yes, I'm all for the ICE raids, but that's not taking care of the problem. You're just taking care of certain individuals. To get into the root of an organization, you need 3 things. A Hispanic organization is 1, you need a Spanish-speaking investigator. You can't have 2 and 3 without number 1. Number 1 has to be a Spanish-speaking investigator. You're never going to flip a source. You're never going to talk to somebody from the community, and you're never going to have someone trust you to say, an informant, and say, okay, without being able to speak their language. It's never going to happen. And on top of it, sitting across from somebody you've just arrested, you're never going to get them to flip when you're talking through a translator. Not going to happen. Right. I've had it. I've done it. It never works.
Yeah.
So number 1. Number 2, you got to have an investigator who knows the crew, knows how they work, their structure. You don't need to know everything about them, but you need to know, hey, in MS-13, it's called a click. You have the first word, the second word, and how it's built. You have a program manager that's down in Mexico, the East Coast program.
Program manager. That's like official.
Correct. So they have a program manager who deals with, so for example, New Jersey falls under the East Coast program. I don't know what it is now, but I knew that during my time from 2015 to 2023, it was called the East, and before 15, but it was called, New Jersey fell under the East Coast program. New Jersey, Massachusetts, North Carolina, they all fell under a command structure.
They keep this in like an Excel spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Come on.
No, it's all very structured. MS-13, as crazy as a street gang as they were very detailed and keeping things. And you did not do something without asking for permission. And you had to, if you wanted to commit a homicide, you had to ask permission. You had to go up the chain of command. So you have to have somebody who understands how to work an investigation. And working important here is a RICO, racketeering case.
Yes.
They have to know how to put together a RICO case.
How do you do that from the bottom up? Because we always hear this thrown around. Obviously, we know it's Ben and G. Robert Blakey to go after the Italian mob, and it can get to the boss or whatever. But if you're starting day one and you're like, we're not going to get to the top guy, the only way we can do this is RICO, where do you start?
You find a loose thread. And you start pulling on it. So you find the crime. So, and I'll use an example of a RICO case we did here in New Jersey. I think it was 2015. In June of 2015, there was a homicide right up the street here in Union City.
Oh, no.
It was a young man who was shot in the head. And we had an individual who provided us information about this, and we started looking into it. So it literally is starting to pick apart at the investigation, looking at the entirety of it. And, whether it be the homicide. Now, RICO is, for those who may not know, you have to prove that you've committed a crime for the good of the organization.
Right.
The good of the organization. And you have to show 2 predicate acts. So in other words, you have to have committed 2 different acts for the good of the organization, not just for the good of you. If you're walking down the street and you randomly shoot somebody because you wanted their Walkman, that's not for the good of the group. But if that shooting was to get yourself a tattoo, that's for the good of the group, because you're showing your strength of MS-13 or TDA. So that could be a racketeering act. So you have to show proof, and it literally is finding someone who's willing to talk and then flip, and that's just interviews and talking and working with the U.S. Attorney's Office and getting the information together. So in 2015 was a homicide. We did not do a superseding indictment until 2018.
Well, it takes a long time to build this stuff.
It takes a long time to gather evidence, because the U.S. Attorney's Office is different from states and locals. I love the states and locals. I love working with them. But from the U.S. Attorney's side is they're not going to indict until they have a rock solid case. And they're saying, hey, we've got enough to go to trial right now, this day, when we're going to indict.
So we can win.
and we're not going to go indict until we have every T crossed, every I dotted. And that's, I worked with some great people at the U.S. Attorney's Office here in DNJ in New Jersey. So it's making sure everything is done right. All the evidence is logged, is boom, 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 boom. And that's why I think the percentage is like 89% of federal cases never see a day in court. Because when it's presented to the defendants, they're like, ooh, it's pretty overwhelming. And they'll take a plea.
Right.
They'll take a plea.
Yeah, it's like 97, 98% conviction rate.
Right.
Which I have some mixed feelings on some of that, but yeah.
But a lot of these guys, so in racketeering, if you commit murder in the aid of racketeering, there's only one sentence. It's mandatory life. Mandatory life. If you're convicted in court, in trial. So a lot of plea deals for people that are facing, murder RICO is 25, 30 years. So they're looking at, they're like, well, screw it. Let me go to trial. So, and then they end up losing. So we did a trial in 2016 for Plainfield, New Jersey. We took 8 individuals of MS-13 in Plainfield to court. All of them were convicted. All
of murder.
I believe 5 out of the 8 were part of murder. So the 5 out of the 8 got mandatory life. In 2021, I went on Union City MS-13, and 3 of them went to trial. All 3 were convicted. So they're awaiting sentencing, I believe, right now. Even for 2021 trial, it just takes, because of COVID, it just backed up everything. Yeah. So they're sitting in jail. They were convicted though. So it takes time. So you need to have an agent who understands how to do RICO and how to put together the 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. Yeah. And the last piece is, you have to have these 3. The last piece is the Department of Justice. The U.S. Attorney's Office you have to have a USA that's willing to put in the time to saying, hey, I'll be in this for the next 2 to 3 years. And if I'm not here, the office is supporting this, the U.S. Attorney. The problem here is one of the problems with the way life is now, and I had this problem at the Bureau, and as far as the DOJ is too, is that a lot of people, when they get to that level, they don't care about the case anymore. They care about their promotion.
That's right.
So they want the short hits. They want to be able to do the stats. Hey, I did 20 arrests, 20 others, because they've got to be like,
win
hey,
on a Tuesday in November.
Exactly. They want to, whether it be promotion to the next level at the AUSA's office, or if it's a promotion at the FBI headquarters. I found at the Bureau side, the further people are getting away from being an agent in the field, the more they're forgetting of
100%.
Why they're here.
100%. Why
they're here, and then they become politicians, and they're going, okay, this is what I need to do. And I was a street agent for 20 years, never took a desk. There were a couple opportunities where I looked at a desk, and there were certain reasons why I didn't take them. But the opportunity, and I loved being a street agent. I loved working the streets.
You get it. You're down on the level.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you get up, people forget. And there's countless times I ran into roadblocks, and that's one of the reasons why I was very happy to hang it up in 23, was that I'd put in for certain approvals that, because a lot of my cases had international ramifications. One individual who was, I was hunting, was a fugitive down in Mexico.
For a gang?
For MS-13.
Okay.
I can't get into details because it's under seal, but I can talk about the general investigation. I had him targeted. I found him. We were working on him. I was able to identify his location. I was able to identify his house. We had a team down in Mexico, working with the Mexican authorities, working with Mexican immigration, and it was a group called Joint Task Force Vulcan. So as one of the founding members, where I was picked by AG Barr under the Trump administration to go after the senior-most leadership in MS-13. I had this guy. He was indicted in the United States. We found him at the house. Teams, we're not going to get into details, but the Mexican authorities kind of botched the hit, and he escaped. He was able to escape. Excellent relationship, though, with pretty good.
Really? You sure?
No, listen.
They sound real good at their jobs.
The team that did that hit that day, wasn't 4 stars on the Yelp. Okay.
Yeah.
The team that was supposed to be there was 4 stars, but the team that got there, so it was a swing and a miss.
Conveniently, they weren't there.
So he escaped. So in 2016, I captured a 10 most wanted. So I knew what needed to be done to get an individual put on the 10 most wanted. So I said, this is a great candidate. This is a great candidate.
What do you mean? What needs to be? So there's like a system
Yeah.
to get on there. Wait. There's like a back office like lottery system at the FBI. Like I think my guy should be on there.
It's an application. You literally, they want to see, the FBI wants to see that, is he catchable? Do we have any information? Is it newsworthy? Can we get a lot of people to watching the
perp walk,
the coverage? Will it gain clicks? Obviously, in today's world. So
FBI's thinking about their Instagram. we need clout.
So and I tried to make argument to why, and there were certain people that at the Department of Justice that said no, and I've been told it was reasons that they didn't want another Hispanic male. This was during the Biden administration, that they didn't want another Hispanic male on the 10 most wanted. That's not why we're here. I listen. I presented to them, and fortunately, I went back to the drawing board. Exactly.
So basically, like DEI, FBI, most wanted. That's kind of where we're at here.
Well, not now.
God, we're so fucked.
Not now. Now it's getting good. But
now they're all Hispanic.
I ended up catching him.
How'd you catch him?
Just getting back to work, putting my knuckles down, and just doing just street agent work.
Well, that's the most boring answer of all time. How'd you really catch him?
It was really so. Again, can't really talk about it too much, but Task Force Vulcan was one of the great task forces that are out there. Right now, they are the lead dog. They've got the tip of the spear, and they've got a lot of support from the administration and DOJ, the executive branch, president. I know that they have a lot of support. So I worked with CBP, HSI, ATF, DEA, and we were able to localize him and capture him. And he is in custody here in the United States now.
Well, that's good.
Yep.
Glad to hear that. That's nice.
No, he's in custody, and he's facing the justice that he deserved.
Good. Well, it's also because you didn't leave long ago. You got out in summer 23.
Correct.
So it's been less than 2 years leaving the bureau. So you've been a part of what we call the modern day bureau.
Yeah.
In every way. So, and I know you got a lot of friends over there and stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting how things are used as a political football. But the point that you make to start on the first thread about the Department of Justice and the stats. Yeah. I had said a few minutes ago, I got mixed emotions on that 97, 98% conviction rate because two reasons. Number one, it's very similar to the conviction rate you see in China and Russia, which we don't want to be compared to. And on that note, I want justice to happen. So if someone's guilty, I hope they're fucking found guilty, and I hope we have the right lawyers and the right FBI team that's able to get them in there. But one guy I've cited as a real piece of shit on this podcast throughout hundreds of episodes, well, not mentioned on hundreds of episodes, but since, probably episode 87, is Preet Bharara, because this guy literally was just a media whore and would parade himself around on his record. He liked to say, I'm like 88-0 against people on insider trading to make it seem like he was going after Wall Street, as in what people on Main Street thought was the Wall Street that did like 08. And really, he went after zero of those people because all he wanted was to win a case. And so actually a friend of mine is someone that, based on the way that this guy Raj Rajaratnam, based on the way that Preet litigated in the media his case back when I followed it when I was in high school, I thought the guy was guilty as hell. And then I actually reviewed the case and I'm like, son of a bitch, this isn't a popular opinion. He's a fucking billionaire hedge fund guy, but this case is actually crazy. The judge ends up getting a huge job afterwards, opening up his own law firm to do the same exact kind of law that he oversaw here. The fucking defense or the prosecutor, same thing, goes to defend insider trading people. They all write a paper 10 years later where they say this law is actually fucked. We shouldn't be putting people. Right. And you see this, and yet all these people win because it's not even just for them. It's like they get to they're incentivized. If I'm going to actually defend them for a second, they're incentivized to do this record-keeping thing because the people who, are running for governor or running for mayor are using their numbers on their ads for the Tuesday in November. And so if they don't make those people happy because it's just a stat, then, we run into a problem. And so is there a way that this system can be fixed, or is it always cynically just going to kind of be like, it's going to be stats?
that's a world where I did not want to be.
We ingest a credit card's worth of microplastics every week, tiny particles in our food, water, and air. They don't just pass through either. They build up in our organs, disrupt our hormones, and are linked to fertility issues, neurological disorders, and heart disease. In early 2024, human brain samples contain 0.5% plastic by weight, with higher levels tied to Alzheimer's and neurodegenerative disorders. Microplastics have also been found in semen and placentas, correlating with lower sperm quality, fetal exposure, and declining fertility. BPA and phthalates mimic or disrupt hormones like estrogen or testosterone, leading to reduced sperm counts, irregular cycles, and developmental issues in children. With microplastics in bottled water, food, and even household dust, avoiding exposure is impossible, but you can support your body's ability to fight back. Moringa activates the NRF2 pathway, which is your body's detox switch, helping flush out microplastic-associated toxins like BPA, BPS, and phthalates. This pathway boosts detox enzymes, making harmful chemicals water-soluble for easier excretion. Not all moringa is created equal, though. Many supplements use lower-quality sources like root, bark, or contaminated powders, lacking the full spectrum of benefits. Plus, moringa naturally tastes bitter and unpleasant. It's kind of gross. And this is what led me to Morning Being by Verso, a rich, chocolatey coffee alternative packed with moringa, cocoa polyphenols, and electrolytes to help detox, fuel energy, performance, focus, and longevity. It's actually incredible how they mask the bitter notes of moringa because that tastes amazing. Verso only uses pure moringa leaf and conducts third-party testing on every batch to ensure its quality. You can't avoid microplastics, but you can support your body's detox process. Start your day with Morning Being for research-backed detox, energy, and health. Click the link below or visit ver.so and use code Julian for 15% off your order. Once again, that's code Julian at ver.so. The link is in the description below for 15% off your order.
That's why I stayed on the streets. That's, for other people to say if we're ever going to change that, that environment. I think that no matter, it doesn't matter if it's red, blue, left, right, we're going to have that. I mean, whether it's, certain side of the groups, favoring and doing something like that. I think that's, and it's not just DOJ. I think that's it's a society thing of people worried about themselves
Yes.
and getting the Instagram and
Yes.
getting the attention in the media. So I think that that's a general society issue, and it's not just an FBI. And I speak from experience on the FBI side because I was there for 20 years. So I agree 100%, and I don't know. Preet and those cases that you speak about. So I can't speak from a position of knowledge. And so I take your word for it. And but it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me. There are very good AUSAs out there. They're great U.S. attorneys, who are the head of these U.S. attorneys. And then there are very good FBI guys. There's the assistant director in charge of the New York division, Jim Dennehy, was recently, forced to resign, by FBI leadership, where I agree with a lot of things that Director Patel is doing. I agree with it.
Oh, you do?
I do. Yeah, I think that he's making some good movements. So
Why do you say that?
Because I think there's a lot of FBI leadership that, again, what we just talked about, that their only thought is, politically driven.
Yes.
And they've gotten away from being a street agent. There are certain people that are, in the media these days that speak from, a position of knowledge, and they were FBI leadership for 15 of their 20 years.
Right.
They were a supervisor, but they're speaking on TV, hey, I know how this investigation. How do you know? You don't know.
You're not
anything.
doing it.
You don't know anything about
That's
that
right.
investigation. There's a certain individual. I'm not going to name him. That he talked about Tren de Aragua, and he gave a comment to his network, and they wrote it in an article. And in the article, he wrote, he made a comment of saying, Tren de Aragua. He said most gang experts agree that Tren de Aragua is not a sophisticated gang. As soon as I saw it, I texted him because I have his phone number. I said, how can you say this? Well, and this is where this is where you understand why his response was his response. He said, well, I got this from, and he got a little, he got up in my face, via text message, but he said, well, did you work TDA? I said, yes, I did. Yes, I did. For the last year of my career, I worked TDA. He goes, well, my people at headquarters are telling me differently, and that's where I get my information from. And I said, that's why you're wrong.
Yep.
That's why you're wrong. I still talk to the guys that are in the streets, okay? I still talk to guys who are conducting these investigations. When I was conducting these investigations, we knew the truth, the reality. When it's written into a paper and then it gets up to those levels of headquarters, it's filtered, it's cleaned.
Yes.
They're not going to see the nitty-gritty dirt under the nails.
It's not in their
details.
backyard.
No.
Right.
So yeah, of course, you're going to get somebody, well, they're not sophisticated. Again, they're not getting the Hispanic organized crime. It's not getting the respect that it should, of like, hey, this is a threat. TDA is a threat. They're sophisticated. They're money laundering. They've got gold mines in Venezuela that they're mining and using that gold to selling it, and then they're taking those funds. The Maduro leadership in Venezuela has allegedly given them these mines and said, here, you can mine these. Use the money at your pleasure.
Right. He's a great delegator.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I texted him and said, how can you do it? Well, he goes, well, my contacts at FBI headquarters think differently. He goes, we can agree to disagree. I'm like, no, you're wrong. You're wrong. And I said, and that's right there is an example of why I think that there's, and it's no joke. It's no secret. I go on CNN, Fox News. I've been interviewed multiple times, different agencies, when something happens. And a lot of these networks come to me because I've told them, I said, listen, I'll tell you how it is. I'll tell you why that guy is, being photographed as he's walking into the Bearcat. Yeah. So there was a fugitive in Pennsylvania 2 years ago that he crawled out of the prison in Pennsylvania. He was on the loose in the woods of Pennsylvania. And, he had been captured, and they were walking him into the Bearcat, and they were cutting the T-shirt off the back of his shirt, and they were taking pictures of his back. And an FBI expert was on a network, and it wasn't FBI, it was another agency. He was an expert, but he was like, I'm an expert. And the news commentator says to him, well, what are they doing here? Well, they're taking pictures of him because they want to identify him from his tattoos. I said, no, they're not. They're documenting any injuries that he has before he runs into the Bearcat. They've got him in cuffs. They've identified him. They know who he is. They look at any picture and going, that's our fugitive. But they're taking pictures so that they can document all his injuries before he gets in the Bearcat, so he can't say, well, this injury, this bruise was because they roughed me up. So it's just knowledge. So these networks, I've told them, I said, listen, I'll tell you why they're doing something. I know about wiretaps. I know about WhatsApp investigations. I know about this because I was just there. I was doing it. Obviously, time goes on. Now there's new investigative. So the further I get away from it, the more dated it is.
Yes.
So, and I'm pulling back from it a little bit from now to focus more on my career now, my company with Christine, my wife. But it's the whole point of saying, listen, your executives, you've gotten away from these investigations. You don't know what it is. You're worried about your career. You're worried about this, and that's where I was saying is, Jim Dennehy was he was my SAC my last 2 years in Newark. He was a good mix where he was part politician, part agent.
This is the guy
that was just asked to retire from in New York. And for whatever reason, I don't know, but he was told, you need to retire. And that was one of the mistakes I believe that happened. Yeah.
Yeah, this guy.
Jim Dennehy. So I retired under his command. He was a good agent.
You don't know why he was asked to resign?
Again, my information is based upon what I see in the media. Right after the Department of Justice, the new administration took over, the Deputy Attorney General, I think his name is Beauvais, put forth a letter to the acting director, Driscoll, and said, I want the names of every single individual at the FBI that investigated January 6th. And he pushed back a little bit and saying, hold on. I don't know what was said. I don't know what was, but he just pushed back and he said, we will stand together. Basically, he's paraphrasing here. Jim Dennehy said to the FBI New York people, we're going to stand together. Whether it be a front, whether it be just like we're going to stand as a family.
Meaning we'll all take responsibility for being a part of that investigation.
I don't know. Again, you'd have to look up exactly what the words he said, and I believe that was probably why he was dismissed or asked to resign. There were a couple. I again agree with some things that Director Patel is doing, and asking certain people to resign and saying, "Hey, you got to go."
Do you see why? And I want to I want to be careful here too with you because I know you have friends there and everything, and I don't want you to say stuff on the record that you don't want to say and stuff like that. But do you see why the trust in the FBI is at an all-time low right now with people, and why someone like this, when he takes a stance like that, would be asked to step aside because of those people who sit in the offices specifically that you just outlined?
No, absolutely. I absolutely can see why, the trust in the FBI is at an all-time low. But I think a lot of it is misplaced. A lot of it is misguided.
So?
There is a general perception, I think, out there of people saying that the FBI is corrupt to the core. There are certain people say the FBI is corrupt to the core. And I vehemently disagree with that. Now, I can speak only from the agent's perspective because I was a street agent for 20 years. And to say that the street agents are rotten to the core is absolutely false.
Yeah, that's unfair.
Unfair and false. When it goes up, that's a different story. I can only speak from experience of me with certain individuals, and I can say exactly, it goes back to, yes, that there are problems. They're politically driven people, individuals. But do I believe that there are individuals at the FBI who are saying, we need to target this group, we need to target that group because of my personal beliefs? I don't believe that. I don't believe.
Not even at that high level, though? Because we've seen that happen.
Well, what I believe is that there are certain individuals, yes, and it looks back like, working Hispanic organized crime. I believe that they're going to say, hey, let's focus looking at this group, okay? Listen, there's nothing wrong with looking at a group, okay? Whether they open, and here's the important word, probable cause.
Yes.
If they have probable cause to believe that any group, religious based, it doesn't matter, whether ethnically, religiously, if they believe, that group is violating a federal crime, that group, they can open up a federal investigation because they have probable cause. So if they believe that group is committing a crime, hey, listen, investigate them, collect the evidence, go before a judge, and then prove it and say, hey, listen, but just opening up a case against somebody because I don't like.
You're targeting them.
That's targeting. That's absolutely wrong. And I don't believe that is happening. And again, I'm saying that I don't believe because I wasn't in 5 other divisions.
You can't speak for 35,000 employees.
I can't speak for 35,000.
Right.
But is there probably, just like any other company in this United States, are there bad people in the FBI? Of course there are.
Every corporation, like even ones that, let's, for the sake of argument here, talk about ones that do things mostly the right way or whatever. Every corporation has a bad office. Has bad people.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of good people. And the problem is all it takes is a few bad people to pull down the reputations of everyone else, especially when people aren't there to see it. So I do agree with you, by the way, and it seems unpopular to say this, but I'll stand by this. There are a lot of people at the FBI who do amazing work and are doing their job the right way and are really trying to seek justice. The problem is that there are people that have been involved in some of these investigations, including on President Trump, that it's like, this is such, like, you're going through his wife's panties drawer. Like, are you fucking kidding me?
Right.
Like, there's nothing, and objectively, whether you like Trump or not, those cases were bullshit. There's nothing to say that anything that was handled there, or even how they handled some of the people that were just walking around on January 6th, not some of the people like actually breaking windows and shit like that. It's like you see stuff like this and you're like, guys, this is a little too much. And not to give the FBI an out here. However, I would be remiss to say, as someone who doesn't work in there and doesn't know how it works specifically, I would imagine there's also pressure coming from above them in some cases that then comes down and forces them to look bad sometimes.
Well, here, I'll give you an example of how one little piece was taken and flipped over, and it was a situation that was created for the masses, and it was tweeted and retweeted, and everyone talked about it for 2 weeks. And just got up in arms regarding the Trump investigation. I was not involved in the Trump investigation, so I don't know anything about it. But there was one time when certain people on the right side took a hold of the deadly force policy that was utilized during the search warrant, whether you agree with the search warrant or not, and the search warrant was executed at Lago. Inside the search warrant, every single search warrant, there's the deadly force policy. Yes. And it clearly states, and for every individual, deadly force is not authorized unless certain criteria are lifted. Well, certain people on the right side took that and said, "Oh, there was a list in there to assassinate Trump." They went in there looking to assassinate.
It's literally the same thing as
Right. And that caught wind, and it was a story for 2 weeks, and then it moved on. But the fact of the matter is people heard that story in that 2-week window, and they believed it. They believed that there was that operation at Mar-a-Lago was was a search with an attempted assassination.
Right.
Which is completely ludicrous. Because when you stop and talked about it at the end of the 2 weeks, they're like, "Oh, okay, let's move on to the next story." And that's what we've become these days. It's just a quick, hey, let's take a story, blow it up to something it's not, and then let's besmirch. And that's how the FBI.
That is how it works, yes.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
And that's the world we live in today. And then I try to come on here and say, listen, the FBI is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Can it be improved? Absolutely. Do I hope Director Patel improves it? Absolutely. I would love to see a much better and stronger and streamlined FBI. But to say that it's rotten to the core, absolutely not.
Yeah, I always talk about this. I cite it on so many podcasts in different contexts. I never get sick of it because it's so true. But like the universal physics law, for every action, there's an equal but opposite reaction to create equilibrium in the middle.
Right.
When your pendulums are like this, you can live with that, right? Because it's nice and smooth. When your pendulums get out here and they do this, they're creating that middle with the extremes.
Right. But this pendulum right here, that doesn't get the clicks. That doesn't get the bleed. If it bleeds, it
exactly
leads.
right.
It's got to be out here.
That's exactly
That gets the, woo, I need it more extreme. How extreme can I get it? And the truth doesn't really matter anymore.
It doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't.
This is what matters. This is what gets the people, the clicks, the links, the discussion, and having the conversations. And listen, I know there are people who are watching this who are not going to agree with me. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. Listen, let's have a discussion. Let's talk about it.
Yes,
hey,
that's what we're doing.
Let's talk about it. And that's fine.
Hey guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you.
Listen, I am not a politician. I never was a politician. And that's probably why I wasn't selected to be a supervisor and move up the chain of command. Listen, I know plenty of supervisors and I know plenty of leadership at the FBI who are phenomenal people. I was just not of that breed. I just liked staying on the streets. No one, well, excuse me, Stanberg. There are few people that could sit down and how should I put this? Let's say, listen, I'm pretty good at what I did. Okay. There are some great people that are still working it, and there are great people that worked behind me, and there will always be great people, working Hispanic organized crime, gangs, transnational criminal organizations. And listen, you want to criticize how I worked? That's fine. I'm always open to criticism. Listen, during my trial, I spent 2 days on being cross-examined during my trial. In 2020, in 2021, correct. I spent 2 days
MS-13 in Union City.
Correct.
Okay.
I spent 2 days, convicting. We went up against 3 guys because they had 3 attorneys. So and they criticized, and that's their job. The defense attorneys are saying, "Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this?" That's their job. But and I was criticized, and when I made certain decisions.
What was the decision they criticized, for example?
Geez. I'd have to go back. And look at the transcript. I mean, like I said, that was something in the past. I'd have to go back and remember. But it was that's their job. And like I said, I'm more than happy to sit in front of somebody. But the important thing is, and we're getting away from this in societies, having discussions, having conversations, saying, listen, you agree with what your side, I agree with what my decisions are. Hey, let's have a conversation. Why do you think that? Why do I think this?
Right.
And not say, hey, you're evil because you think that, and I'm evil, you're evil. So that's where I think we're getting away from.
I think a lot more people out there, and they're not the ones who go into comment sections, for example, or who tweet the posts to get the most likes and stuff like that. But I think a lot more people than we realize do, like listening right now, in fact, do have nuance in these scenarios. Maybe they lean left or they lean right on certain things, but like they like to listen to conversations like this because they like to hear the things that they can think about more and decide for themselves. The problem is exactly what you said. You couldn't have put it any better, which is that unfortunately, like you used a it bleeds, it leads line that you guys had within the agency, but that's, that's exactly what it is on social media. If I go out and I say something that is hardcore on the left or hardcore on the right, I'm going to incite mass agreement and mass disagreement at the same time, and it's
Yep.
going to go straight up through the algorithm. If I say something that says, well, I can see this or not see that, it doesn't do it as much for people because it's like, all right, well, all right, moving on to the next one. They want to feel that feeling of like team or
and
like
you know
anti.
what? And like I said, I'll be straight up. And we talked about this before. I'm not of that world.
Yeah.
I'm not of that world that's going to give the sound bite. I don't like that.
Good.
I don't. Listen. I have my opinions. I have my political leanings, and I live in Montana for a reason. So
Big old Democrat.
It's a beautiful state. It's a beautiful state of Montana. Let's just say that. So, and I want my kids raised in a certain, environment, in a certain world. And I like, Montana is
with no Dunkin' Donuts. That's bad parenting.
Dunkin' Donuts.
Damn it.
Seriously. I mean, it's, if Dunkin' Donuts is listening, please reach out to me. I would love to talk about opening franchises up there. But there's a company called City Brew.
He wants to franchise them.
I will help set them up. Now I may end up to being like 500 pounds here in a couple of years, but D&D. So yeah, their stock prices and they're whenever we come back here to New Jersey, they could see their revenues probably go up through their roof because we're just hitting D&D every day.
Yeah.
So
gotcha. Well, what is the thing you're most looking for? If we're sitting here 3 years from now and Kash Patel was in charge of the FBI during that whole time, what kinds of things would you like to see that you think would be like a win for the FBI's brand moving forward?
I think that, moving forward, it's going to continue going down the road where they're going right now and, improve it and streamline it. Again, I don't think that the Bureau is, leans one way or the other. I don't believe that the Bureau is, hard left. I don't believe the Bureau is hard right. The street agents. I'm talking about the street agents.
Yeah, that's an important distinction.
And that's an important distinction. I'm not going to speak of a position where, FBI headquarters. FBI headquarters needs to be improved. It needs to be streamlined. I think it's gotten a little too fat. And I think Director Patel's a decision to move out 1,000 agents back into the field, I think is a great decision. Get them back into the field. Do I think that FBI headquarters is, the what was the words he used? The deep state, the headquarters of the deep state. I don't believe that. So that's just, again, but I don't believe it because I've never spent time at headquarters other than some short stints. I'd like to see more attention to, real crime, and, them focusing on, things that are the threats to national security. The terrorism branch, the CT branch, the criminal branch, they're doing a great job. I mean, there are so many wins, and you were talking about the conviction rate. There are so many cases that the public never hears about because they get the news. I mean, there's certain ones that are bigger ones there's publicity, put out on them, but it's not, like you said, it's not the wins that we're, the Bureau it's the losses, the misses.
For sure. Even as a street agent, though, I'm curious your mentality on this. It's a weird question to ask because, like, your job is to go find the bad guys, and when you get your eyes on the bad guys, make the case and bring it to justice.
Yes.
But removing the politics of, like, a record of, like, oh, I've won X number of cases versus only this number of losses.
If we get those people out, then yes, I think a lot more. We'll get a lot more work done.
But even on the street level, for guys like you who were working the cases and actually building them, if you built a case where obviously you've now brought it to the prosecutor because you think that whoever, the person you built it against, let's say it's one guy, is guilty of what they did. And you think that from an honest perspective and because you did your best on the case, like looking yourself in the mirror, there was no confirmation bias, stuff like that. You built a case and you're like, yeah, I think this guy did this. And then it got to trial and it became very clear or perhaps even slightly.
Let me interrupt you for a second here on something you just said. I never would bring a case to the U.S. Attorney's Office where I think they did it. I never would. because that's what the evidence is for. I would bring a case to the U.S. attorneys because I know they did it. I have the physical evidence.
Okay,
I have the statements. I have tickets. I have photographs, and I can't. I would find it very, very hard to believe that an FBI agent would bring a case, and I'd have a very difficult time believing the U.S. attorney would bring a case that they think he did it.
Let's go with your language then.
They did it.
You know he
Correct.
did it. And then it gets to court, and not just because they have some like sick Johnny Cochran level attorney who's like really good at his job, but literally because new evidence comes out in court where you're like, wait a minute.
Yep.
I knew he did this, and now I'm thinking he didn't. Would you view it as like a victory for the United States if therefore he were found not guilty because of something that you, through no fault of your own, didn't come across in your investigation, and now you don't get the win on it?
I didn't care about getting the win. I wanted to make sure that the bad people were put in jail. If I collected all this evidence showing that these individuals did what they did, and there was evidence showing that person wasn't there at the scene, I want the correct judgment. I don't care if it's a not guilty. Good. That's fine. I don't care about that. I want to make sure if he did such things, he needs to go to jail.
Right.
For me, I didn't care about the stats.
And if he didn't,
he shouldn't go to jail.
Got it.
100%.
I like that.
No. I never would want somebody who didn't do something, even if they were a hardened gang member and I know they're just sick and a danger to the community. If I'm there to say, hey, listen, this is all the work I did to show that they did this. If there's something to say that, then I wouldn't want them in jail at all. No.
Yeah. The other thing with a lot of these cases that I see it from both sides because it's so hard. It's like when you have to build a complicated case, like especially a RICO case or something like that, I don't see how you build that case without having informants, right? You have to have informants.
Correct.
Right? Which means you also have to have people that you catch being guilty of something, whatever it is, and then they turn state's witness because you're trying to get up above them, right? I agree. I think that's how you have to build the case. The other side of it that I've seen in cases that frustrates me is that sometimes this is taken advantage of, though, because you'll get someone who's already a criminal. They'll lie for anything, and they're incentivized to say whatever you want them to say.
Correct. And I would never want somebody who's going to lie and give me something just to get. So a lot of the incentives we had in MS-13 cases was so either to get a reduced sentence if they were part of the clique, part of the crime, they get reduced sentence, or if we had informants, they'd get incentives towards immigration status. And so they may be an illegal immigrant in the country, and we'd give them a certain visa that they could stay here in the country throughout it and could afford them the ability to apply.
Wow.
So they'd get an incentive to stay here temporarily, and then they would get a pathway to citizenship. So it never was guaranteed. Nothing was ever guaranteed to any of my informants. I never said to them, I guarantee you I will get you this. My always statement was, I'm going to work my hardest.
I'm going to do my best.
I'm going to do my best.
They walk out, you're like...
Because ultimately, the people who decide is the Department of Justice. As an FBI agent, I can never guarantee, and I never guaranteed anything to anybody.
That's good.
I just said I will try my best to get you this immigration status so that you could get a pathway to citizenship because you've cooperated.
It's like that Trusky one where he's like, got good news and bad news. Good news is we got your payment. Bad news is they gave you life. Sayonara. You're like, I tried.
So I always wanted to work with the informants and get the right information there, and sometimes it worked out, and sometimes it don't. It's working with informants and, like you said, people that you bring them forward and you present them the evidence you've collected,
right?
And then they see it and they're like, okay, if I go to trial, I could be facing 20 to 30 years, or if I testify, I could get a reduced sentence. And again, the Department of Justice would never guarantee you, because ultimately it was the decision of the judge,
right?
What the sentencing was. But they would say what was called a 5K letter. They would see it and they'd be like, okay, this person testified on such and such a date and provided this, and they'd get a list of all the cooperation. And then the judge would make a sentence based upon their decision.
Right. And the judge usually, like in a lot of these cases I follow, they're generally within the ballpark in those
Correct.
types of situations.
Yes.
Okay.
So the U.S. Attorney's Office would make their recommendation and saying, hey, listen, based upon his cooperation, we believe a sentence between, certain window. And then the judge would look at that, what they're recommending versus what crime they've committed, and why they're there, and then the cooperation. So that three, and I'm sure there's other factors that the judges take into consideration, and then they make a sentencing. So I knew we had a lot of people who would rather, provide information than spend 30 years in jail.
For sure.
And now they're doing 10 to 15. Now, here's the thing is, a lot of these guys, these MS-13 members, they're illegal immigrants. So even though they cooperated, they're reduced sentence.
Tom Homan's getting them.
Tom Homan's getting them at the end. At the end of their 10 years, Tom Homan's
He's
getting them.
outside the prison like, come with me.
Let's go. Yeah, I got a flight for you. So, yeah.
All right. Well, it's better than being in prison, I guess, getting deported.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder how they're dealt with, though, back at home if they ratted. That's the thing.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe it is better to be in prison.
Maybe.
They should have thought about that.
Maybe.
Anyway, not your problem. But back to the actual gangs. We got on a good long tangent there. I like that. But we started talking about the Trinitarios, and you were initially talking about like their structure and how they have, what'd you say, a program manager?
At MS-13.
That was MS-13.
MS-13's got a program manager, right.
So, and then we were getting into MS-13's like setup. So you said MS-13 has a program manager, and they have like an East Coast group, a West Coast group, and all that. Like, how many MS-13 members do we estimate are operational in the U.S. at any one time?
That's a good question these days. I mean, the numbers fluctuated because one of the things that really motivates members of joining a group is how popular they are on the TV. What's the popular group right now? TDA. So I believe that those numbers are booming right now because, especially with the the illegal migrant community that's in this country now, they see that who is the group that everybody's talking about, and there's Trinidad. So we want to those, they gravitate towards those people. So I believe their recruiting numbers are way up. I think that there are thousands of like legit TDA members and then thousands of lower tier 12, 13, 14-year-old kids.
12, 13, 14-year-old kids they're getting for this.
You'll see, 2 years ago in Times Square, you had, out of the Roosevelt Hotel, you had 12, 13, 14-year-olds that were being recruited into TDA. And then
how would they recruit them?
Hey, we're TDA. What do you want? You want to make money?
Like in the migrant center, they go in
Yeah.
there?
If you look up the Roosevelt Hotel, they were doing that. So you'd have 12, 13, 14-year-olds going out into Times Square, and they were pickpocketing, stealing from people, and NYPD would get them, but they're 12 years old. So what they would do is just a slap on the wrist, and they'd be back at the Roosevelt Hotel that night. So yeah, so right there, those are good photos right there. That's it. They're all children in Times Square, and they're thrown up because, hey, TDA is now the cool group. So,
and it's always Venezuelans in it, right?
As far as I know, yes. MS-13 has Hondurans, Guatemalans, El Salvadorians, and I think that generally, I would say Venezuelans are TDA.
When did TDA first come across your desk?
So TDA came across my desk in, I retired in 23 in September. So in spring of 23, I flew to South America to represent the FBI at a multinational conference where a lot of the countries from South America and Central America were there to discuss a new gang called Tren de Aragua. And they were there to discuss it. And so Chile has really taken the brunt of it. Chile has taken a lot of the brunt of the TDA activity.
A lot of Venezuelans in Chile, huh?
They've moved south. Yeah, they moved through Peru into Chile, and then there's a lot because it's a very affluent communities in Chile.
When you say they move, are they literally? I mean, that's a long way. They're not like walking in caravans, are they? Or they find it more
cars? I mean, you just drive from one country to the next.
And you can do that down there pretty easily, like that.
It's
even
not
if
like
you're those guys.
Yeah, even if you're those guys. So they go down there via their communities, via their transit system, and how they get down there, and they're just going to Chile. And so a lot of the crimes you're seeing, like in Aurora, El Paso, a lot of things that are getting the media attention these days that Tren de Aragua is doing, they've been doing it for years in Chile. They've been doing it for years. The building, the apartment takeover, they did that for years in Chile. So
How are they doing that in Chile? They just like go in and say, "This is like Captain Phillips. This is ours now."
Yep, it's as simple as that. This is our building now. In Aurora, so I knew about Aurora about 3 to 4 months before it actually hit the press.
Yeah, why were people trying to say like they didn't do that, or like, well, it was only one building? Like, what
because
the
it's
fuck?
politically motivated. It was all politics. It was all 100%. Aurora was absolute bullshit because it was all politics. Oh no, there's nothing. And I always joke about it. And then, the movie, there's back in the 1900s, a movie called The Naked Gun, right? And there's a guy standing in front of a burning building. Nothing to see here. The fireworks going off in the background. Nothing to see. That's exactly what happened in Aurora. It was crap. So I knew about Aurora about 3 months before it hit the media. And I was talking to building management and saying, don't do anything. Don't shut it down.
Oh, you were talking with the actual building management of the
I was trying to help them out.
apartments?
I was trying to help them out, yeah.
Whoa.
They reached out to me because they found out, what I did and that I was retired. So I was talking to building management and I was like, listen, this is a great RICO case. Don't because they were planning on shutting the building down. And if you shut the building down, all the members are going to scatter.
Yeah.
So I was like, don't do anything.
Just let them run.
Just let the FBI or HSI do their investigation. You've got a great RICO case here. You want to disrupt it. But the ball was already in motion to shut the buildings down, so there's nothing I can do about it. And then it hit the media, and then it was done. All those members scattered. So once that woman released the video of the guys walking down in the hallways with the long guns, that was done. It was all those members left. So that the right in the aftermath of that. So there was an acting police chief in Aurora, which was I believe it's a Republican mayor, but a Democrat city, the city council, everything like that. And of course, law enforcement wants to be like, oh, there's nothing to see here. We're fine. Democratic governor saying absolutely, no, there's no gang problem. It's an isolated incident. Well, there was a video that's out there. It was the acting chief of police of Aurora. So it was before him, right before him. It was a female. So she does. Yes, that's the video right there. So she is acting right out that building. Right. What's not known about this is that video camera. She's making it look like she's talking to the media. That camera was the OP, the Office of Public.
Oh, it was her PR.
Here's her PR people.
Oh my God.
Videotaping this. Now she's standing in front of a building, which that's not one of the 3 buildings TDA took over. Okay. And on top of that, so she's saying, yeah, there's no problems here. And then on top of that, she got her officers, they've got video of them knocking on doors and saying, do you have a problem here? Is there a gang problem in this building? While the camera's pointed, of course the people are gonna be like, no, there's nothing to see here. There's nothing to see here. We're totally fine. And then, but here's really what's not told. These buildings right here were swept by SWAT right before they showed up. So of course there's not going to be any gang members walking around here with guns. I mean, this is such a setup. This was such crap setup of saying, oh, we've got nothing here. This is fine. That's not even one of the buildings that was taken over by TDA. But that's the complex, but not one of the buildings.
And this lady got fired?
No. She did. I don't know what happened to her because there was no controversy. There was never anybody discussed. I mean, I've heard about this story right here, but I don't think anybody got in trouble.
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.